Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Schnelly. I'm with the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus. Thank you very much for joining us today to discuss how we together can help our residents in our communities improve their homes to be more age-friendly and accessible. Over the years, the mayors, planners, and other municipal leaders who make up the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus's Housing and Community Development Committee have consistently elevated this topic as a top priority. Because of this, we're especially grateful for support from AARP Illinois that allowed us to bring in national expertise to help us help our local residents. So today's training webinar is 1 year in the making. This time last year, a group of mayors and planners met with Richard Duncan, director of the Universal Design Institute and Better Living Design Institute, to discuss the challenges that their residents face in improving their homes to be more age-friendly and accessible. And out of this input, Richard Duncan created a new guidebook titled Accessible and Universal Home Remodeling, which will be presented today and shared with all attendees afterwards. So our goal for this training this afternoon is to help you as elected officials, as municipal staff, as nonprofit and social service agencies, and as home builders and contractors become familiar with the guidebook, as well as available funding resources, so that you can readily share this with residents who need them. So I want to start by introducing Adam Ballard, the Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach for AARP Illinois. Adam has long been a leader and advocate for more livable communities for all residents, especially older adults and residents in the disability community. So thank you, Adam, for sharing your leadership on this issue and on this project.
Thank you, Ben. I'm glad to be here with you all today, and AARP Illinois especially is very proud to continue our partnership with the Mayor's Caucus on promoting livable communities for all, and especially homes that work for everyone, right? AARP has long been focused on this as a key aspect of giving our older adults the dignity and the freedom to live as they want through the rest of their lives, right? We know that from multiple times polling our membership, the vast preference of older adults everywhere is to remain in their homes and not have to be forced into the care facilities if at all possible. But the main reason that usually happens, or at least one of the main reasons that usually happens to folks, is because of homes that aren't built for bodies that change as we age. So we're happy to be part of this conversation. We were happy to provide support to Richard and, again, the Mayor's Caucus here, and this is part of a continuing partnership. So we will continue to promote age-friendly living and policies in support of your communities, and we are always going to be a positive and enthusiastic partner in this work. So thank you, and we look forward to hearing from Richard and the rest of the folks who are presenting today.
Well, thank you again, Adam. And I'll now turn to our main presenter this afternoon, Richard Duncan. So director of the R.L. Mace Universal Design Institute and the Better Living Design Institute, Richard has spent over 35 years guiding efforts to make housing and communities more accessible and universally designed for everyone, regardless of age or ability. Richard created the nation's first urban design guideline for accessibility. He contributed to the National Association of Home Builders Certified Aging in Place Specialist course. And Richard is a co-author of the National Association of Home Builders Universal Design Build course, among many other important achievements. So thank you, Richard, for your work on this guidebook and for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben, so much. Thank you to Adam and AARP for once again supporting important work in the area of housing and aging. And thank you, Ben, for your organizational skills. Ben has done, you should know, a terrific job in trying to get us organized. And if we fail miserably, it's not because his efforts were lacking. It was entirely because of the cats he was trying to herd. So I'll have that cautionary note. So thanks for that, Ben. So, and thanks for being here. I appreciate being able to talk to you again. So we're going to start with a pretty logical place in trying to define in a couple of different ways what the actual need is for the kinds of issues that we're talking about. So it's fairly statistical. You've got lots of numbers there, and we'll just see what these numbers play out as we go down the list. So 20%, that's the percentage of the population that has some kind of disabling condition. I think professionally and confidentially, that's a low number. I think that was a great number back in the end of the 20th century. I think with you're adding to the numbers you'll be seeing in a minute, it's actually pretty much higher than that. And it's a very dynamic number. People enter and exit disability all the time. But consider this, an astonishing 31% increase in the population of older adults between 2020 and 2030. I'm not sure that's ever happened before for any population except maybe kids in the baby boom over a 10-year period. Imagine, if you will, the older residents of your communities all being almost a third more by 2030 than they were a couple of years ago. So it should give you pause and should give you some more added emphasis to why this is important. Greater than 3.5 million. That's not my portfolio size. That is the number of residential units in the Chicago metro area, approximately, somewhat more north of 3.5 million units. Less than 3% of them have significant accessibility features. That's a pretty typical number nationally, can change somewhat from place to place, but think of that number, 3.5 million, less than 3% have significant features, over 20% of the population and growing have disabling conditions. And the number is now 11% have a resident who uses a mobility device. And you look at the 31% increase in the population of older adults. Sadly, we represent a growing number of folks with mobility problems who use and sometimes misuse devices. We're a big reason for those numbers increasing. So all those will be going up. And then finally, 300,000, more than 300,000, the number of additional accessible homes rendered one way or another that will be needed, that are needed now. And that number, again, will grow over time. We have to be concerned with not just meeting current needs, but even catching up to the growth in those. And that's a very sobering thought. So this is what the book was all about. And this is really what we're after, is kind of reminding people that from cradle to grave, really, there's a whole lot of human characteristic variation among the population. And it really is benefiting old folks, it's benefiting people of all ages with and without identifiable disabilities. And to kind of put a capstone on this, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning projects an 80% increase in the population of older adults over the next 3 decades. So this is not just an issue for this decade or even the next decade, but for the next 3 decades. So this growth will continue continuously, and we're about trying to figure out how we can help you catch up to that and start meeting the need now and as we grow in numbers going forward. So yes, it is a hair on fire emergency. That's our technical term for this. And as we've identified, and as you probably know from your professional and personal lives, most older adults are growing old in homes that were not designed for growing old in comfortably and safely. And they either are now or will soon be places where older adults can't live safely and independently, with all kinds of devastating effects on their physical and mental health, including those of their families and those of their caregivers. So it's an issue, this person housing mismatch that's growing more every year. Not everybody is a planner. Some older adults are planners. We like that. Too few of us are. Most of us wait until it's too late to make changes. But if we are, and we're looking around the community to see if there's places we can move to, places we can downsize to, places that may be in walkable communities, places that may have age-friendly features that we can take advantage of, not that many of them are out there. So that's a piece of the problem, not just renovating existing homes, but building new housing. We'll return to that theme at the end of the presentation. And of course, here we have the remodeling part of it. It's often challenged itself. There are some homes that simply don't lend themselves to being remodeled effectively. We know that remodeling is expensive, and we know that expertise in remodeling area is not always present. I know you've got some expertise in the Chicago area, so that's good. And hopefully this publication we'll talk about in a second will help. And we have a series of polls that Ben has cooked up for you all. So this is poll number 1. What are the main barriers keeping residents in your communities from improving their homes to be more accessible? And Ben, you're gonna guide people through the, there we go. So we're seeing lack of awareness in the lead, limited resources close behind, impractical housing to begin with is now coming on strong. This is like a horse race. And then some other issues. And Ben, I'm thinking that the results of these will be available to people later on. Yeah. So is this pretty much it then? You think we got the numbers?
Yep.
So yeah, the book should help with the awareness part. It should help in terms of resources for financial resources, in addition to the other materials that Ben's going to have to hand out. And of course, some, as I said, some homes just don't work well. Is that enough on this, Ben? Okay. Should I? So should I pop this out? Okay.
Yep. Okay,
I'll do that. There you go. Poll 1. So there's our first inkling. We have, I think, 2 or 3 more polls coming your way. So stay tuned on that. So here's the publication. We were careful to title it for both accessible and universal home remodeling. Accessible being the custom kinds of remodeling that needs to take place to respond to the particular issues of a particular resident, individual in the household, as well as the possibilities of universal design, which is to say generic high function housing features that can be easily customized later. So we present both of these. Where am I with this? Okay, I think we're well behind our timing already. So you can see from the table of contents, we have a whole cluster of issues that we address in terms of the exterior of the house, front access, rear access, interior circulation. We cover this, even electrical and control locations, bathrooms, kitchens. We have something in the end for accessory dwellings as well, which kind of straddle the new construction remodeling area. And importantly, something on resources at the end, which I'll show you as we go along. So the goals were threefold. First is just to provide ideas for functional home renovations. Second is to highlight accessible and universal solutions, as I mentioned a minute ago. And then to supply cost ranges. In doing so, we've guaranteed that we'll be hated by everyone, those who think we've quoted things too high and those who think we've quoted things too low. But everyone wants to know the answer to these questions, particularly consumers. What's the ballpark? And that's what we're giving folks in this, is the ballpark of what they can expect to pay. Often, sadly, far more than they think they can get away with. And so throughout the entire book, chapter by chapter, we'll identify accessible solutions and universal solutions. Then we begin with a chart at the front end that kind of highlights in broad strokes the kinds of things you might find in a universal home versus the kinds of things you might find if you're customizing it for individuals. A very brief coverage of those things. But it's important to know the difference and to not call one the other and the other one, even though there's a little bit of overlap in some cases. So with exterior projects, we cover ramps and graded entries, which we hope there are some opportunities for. We know that most home repair programs are carpentry based. We wish more of them were dump truck and concrete based. so that you have some more permanent ways to get in and out. We can all build ramps that are as nice looking as the one you see there. We talk about slopes, we talk about railings, details, all kinds of things that are useful to know, but things not to forget if you're thinking about designing any of these features in and around your house. Maneuvering space, lighting, of course. So we talk about graded entries. If you don't have too much of a rise from grade, we know you can bring earth in, provide earth berms, raise the deck to the level of the first floor. In many cases, putting a roof over it's really helpful because you really want to protect individuals as they come and go from the home. And those of us who are older take longer to come and go. So having that weather protection is important. And also it's essential with level entries that you provide some kind of protection against water infiltration at thresholds and around doorways at the bottom, whether it's snow, ice, or rain. But we talk about ramps and we do some detailing like in here to show some dimensions, some clearances that are required, slopes that you don't want to ignore, widths of ramps, things like that. So this is helpful, again, for kind of idea generation and general ballparking of how much space do you want to allow for folks coming and going if you're building something like that. And with those prior pictures, you saw kind of a simple one-story home on a larger lot. We also, mindful of a lot of the neighborhood conditions in and around Chicago and Northern Illinois, we're showing you a two-story home on a much smaller lot, and what are the options for entry in those locations. So you can see the front and back there, and we've shown you not just a ramp solution, which is in this case one of them, but we also showed you a vertical platform lift solution, and with reminders like providing a roof cover over it. And again, if you're doing this in the back, you have to rebuild the deck, raise it to the first floor, provide enough room for people to get around. And in this case, you can see it's so much bigger than the old porch that really is a value added in terms of what it's offering for outdoor living there. And also a ramp. You can see in this picture, we've also got the ramp that curves around and goes down to the pathway that leads to the front of the house. So we're trying to make sure that people, when they're moving into this realm, kind of use this as a checkbox, all the things that need to be attended to before they go into design and go into construction. We're going inside the house. We remind people about hallway width. We remind people about the possibilities that may come from replacing a door with a wider door, providing a pocket door in some cases, reversing a door swing as being a simple way to make a positive change, and include mention of some things such as barn doors, which are not only increasingly popular these days, but also do have some functional advantages in terms of avoiding that door swing into or out of spaces that can take up so much room. Again, a very quick coverage of this stuff. So in bathrooms, again, we talk about universal solutions, accessible solutions. We have small scale bathrooms, larger bathrooms. We talk about the importance of showers and curbless showers, so you don't have any step in necessary. It's just, you can walk in or roll in. We talk about the difference between grab bars and handholds, maneuvering space, kinds of doors. I've just touched on that slightly. Vanities or non-vanities, lighting, and then flooring. So all those things we touch on in this. And this is an example of, kind of a standard small house, first floor, one bedroom and a small bathroom adjacent, what might be done there. So we show you the before, we show you the after, which is the larger image here. And by stealing a piece of the closet next door to the bathroom that's part of that bedroom, you can create a nicely sized curbless shower and just enough room inside that bathroom to be somewhat accommodating. Nobody would confuse us with a really ample sized bathroom, but it's what you can do in a small situation when you can only grab a little bit of additional space. So we're showing people examples of that. Other examples of, what happens if it's a first floor home and you've got a small bedroom and maybe you're empty nesters, and what do you do then? Can you do some remodeling and really help yourself in terms of quality of life and so on? So yeah, in this case, you can turn a big chunk of that first floor, or a significant chunk, into a much more graciously sized bathroom. Again, with, in this case, a curbless shower and a tub, 2 fixtures, works well for a lot of folks. Dual sink, toilet in the corner. I think that we show both a hinge door as well as a pocket door here, just giving people a sense of options for there. Kitchen, same kind of thing. We show you universal kitchens, accessible kitchens. We talk about counters and the heights of counters, knee space when it's necessary or not, where you can provide and how you can provide storage, what kind of a new maneuvering room you may need inside. How about lighting and then flooring as well? All those areas are touched on. So one flavor of an accessible kitchen, or a couple flavors here with a wall-mounted oven that's actually at a pretty good height for a lot of folks, an under-counter microwave and knee space under the sink, and some removable storage adjacent to the stove that can be used for storage, but then rolled out of the way if you needed to, or used as a mobile countertop, because you can have like a cutting board on top of that. Under-counter dishwasher as well. So a couple of different flavors of how you might render an accessible kitchen. And no wall cabinets. In this case, you can always add wall cabinets in, but we're trying to show how you can provide a lot of storage at counters and under counters that's more usable. And then, of course, universal kitchens doesn't look that different. You can have higher counters in those. You can have one lower counter surface if you want to, and then all the typical appliance choices side by side, or other kinds of refrigerators, front controls on stoves. Another example of an under counter dishwasher, if there's a small sized family, and under counter microwaves. We emphasize microwaves because it's so often put over the ranges, and that's never the place where microwaves should be placed if you're thinking about any aging folks at all, or thinking for a lot of folks. And again, as I said, we put at the end some coverage of an accessory dwelling, which might be interesting to some folks, and how that might be rendered. So we have both kitchens and bathrooms and a couple of floor plans, I think, about how that might work. So we have a bunch of resources at the end. All of these, I think, are digitally clickable links. I would advise somebody to take charge of updating these every year, at least, so that they stay fresh, particularly if there's going to be an online posted version of this, which I hope there is. But that's essential to keeping this to be a viable a document going forward. And then we have some do's and don'ts, and we really encourage people not just to use it for renovations, but take these ideas and apply them to new construction as well. It's entirely possible. We'd like them to adapt the ideas, not think they can just build off of this. And then we encourage people to look at all the alternatives, of which there are several and many in most of the chapters, really to use it as idea generation with your designer, or with your builder or remodeler. So we encourage folks not to build from the guide, because it really is, that's not its purpose. It's really just for ideas. And then don't consider the cost more than ballparks. It should give you just an understanding of where the costs will be, not a precise measurement of that. So that's the end of my very brief coverage of this. I'm not too far behind my time, Ben. And so we open it up for some questions now, right? If people have questions about what they're seeing. Ben,
Yes,
do
I'd welcome questions that you have for Richard. Thank you for the excellent work on the guidebook. The guidebook provides about all of these pieces. But this is a great opportunity for anyone to ask Richard some questions while we have him here about what we just saw.
I'll interject here. Later, we'll talk about ways to promote this, and to pull people in and get them interested in kind of thinking about these ideas more. You want people to raise their hands or chat function, Ben? What's the protocol?
Anyone can go off mute, ask questions, share questions in the chat.
Well, it's good to know I was crystal clear.
Yeah. And I imagine many have clicked the link and are skimming through the guidebook themselves right now, who are seeing it for the first time. So with that, Richard, I think we can segue into the next section, which actually starts with another poll. And I'll carry this through. So something that we heard from the Housing and Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus is that, and as we saw in the poll earlier, that for some households, the lack of awareness of steps to take is the barrier. For other households, they know the steps to take, but funding is the main barrier. So we're going to transition a good portion of our time today to talk about funding resources that are currently available or will soon be available. So we'll start with a poll here. And that is for the group, what funding resources do households in your communities currently utilize to make accessibility improvements to their homes? Maybe this is something you hear from residents, maybe neighbors, maybe loved ones. Those who are taking these steps, what steps are they taking? We've got 5 or 6 answers so far. I'll let some more respond and then I'll be reading responses out myself. So the first response, which I think we'll hear several of, is CDBG Community Development Block Grant through a county or municipality if they're income qualified. Some have said corporate donations. City of Evanston has a housing rehab program. There's another single family rehabilitation loan program. One is township grants. There's a nonprofit that I've heard of called Rebuilding Together. But several are saying just their own money or borrowing and savings. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our next speakers. So first, Jason Eccles is the manager of special initiatives at Age Options, the area agency on aging in suburban Cook County. In this role, Jason supervises the special initiatives unit, which includes social isolation programs, LGBT plus initiatives, health and vaccination efforts, and more recently, efforts related to housing preservation and rehabilitation. Also presenting on this topic today is Megan Wildman. Megan has been a staff member of Age Guide, the Northeastern Illinois Agency on Aging, for 12 years. Megan is the Aging and Disability Resource Network Supervisor. She's responsible for leadership of Age Guide's funded Aging and Disability Resource Network services, benefits access services, friendly visiting and calling services, and transportation services. So Megan oversees a suite of programs and services. Megan also serves as the agency's liaison to DuPage County. So thank you, Jason and Megan, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ben. And hi, everyone. This is Jason Eccles from Age Options. Again, Ben, thanks so much for having us. And I'm thrilled to get to present with Megan from Age Guide. Today, we're going to talk about area agencies on aging, Age Options for suburban Cook County, and Age Guide for the surrounding counties. Next slide, Megan. Oh, thank you so much. So before we talk about area agencies on aging, it is important to kind of understand the background of where they come from, which is the Older Americans Act. The Older Americans Act, or OAA, was passed in 1965 with the goal to promote the independence and dignity of older Americans, enabling them to live in their homes and communities for as long as possible. So it's kind of a key point of it, staying in your home or community as long as possible. The Older Americans Act defines a federal, state, and local organizational infrastructure known as a National Aging Network. Now, the National Aging Network currently includes 56 state and territorial units on aging. For Illinois, it's the Illinois Department on Aging. and more than 600 area agencies on aging, or AAAs, like Age Guide and Age Options, more than 270 Title VI Native American aging programs, and more than 20,000 community service providers. The main takeaway that I usually say is that no matter where you're at in the US, there's an area agency on aging or equivalent serving you. The Older Americans Act needs to be reauthorized every few years, and it's been reauthorized 15 times since its inception. The Older Americans Act provides funding and guidance for the provision of mandatory and optional services for older adults. These services are designed to serve target populations of older adults, such as those living in poverty or lower income. And but in essence, it really is for any older adult, typically 60 or older. There's services that are there for older adults in general. Next slide, Megan. Thank you. Okay, so what are area agencies on aging? They are usually nonprofits or governmental entities designated by the Illinois Department on Aging in our state. In Illinois, there are 13 of us, 13 area agencies on aging, including Age Options and Age Guide. Area agencies on aging plan and coordinate a network of services through the Older Americans Act, as well as advocate for older adults, people with disabilities, and care partners. In Illinois, area agencies on aging mainly contract with local service providers to deliver services, but some, including Age Options and Age Guide, deliver a couple of programs ourselves. Local service providers may deliver services to an entire county, which we'll see as Age Guide's model, or for Age Options, we end up kind of doing services by township. And so in our section that Megan and I are going to go through, we'll also reference ADRN agencies. Those are our local kind of agencies that we'll cover at the end exactly what they are. But just if you hear us say that, we're talking about local agencies that we encourage you to be in touch with. Next slide. So now I'll talk more about Age Options, which is my agency. It's where I work. Age Options is a suburban Cook County area agency on aging. We cover all of Cook County except the city of Chicago. As an agency, our mission is to innovate, partner, and advocate to improve systems and services in order to strengthen communities so people thrive as they age. People thriving as they age is our vision. And I have to always point out, that's everyone. We're all aging. So this is Age Options, creating a world for all of us. Older adults, people 60 or older, make up 23.5% of the total suburban Cook County population. To learn more, ageoptions.org. Next slide. Okay. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a very specific short-term project that's here at Age Options for suburban Cook County. It's called our AARP Home Preservation Project. AARPA stands for American Rescue Plan Act. The funding for this was short-term. It does end at the end of September this year, but we're looking for ways to continue this pilot project that we have. And again, there's oftentimes programs like this that are trying to meet needs for older adults in the area. We encourage you to be in touch with either Age Options or Age Guide or our local agencies serving your area. So in 2022, Age Options was asked to provide a plan to Illinois Department on Aging for how we would use ARPA dollars that were coming our way. We were 2 years into the pandemic. Housing costs and evictions remained a major concern, skyrocketing cost, increased evictions, and more. We held listening sessions, and one of the things that kept coming up was housing. What do we do here? People being unhoused and all of these different things that were coming, moratoriums on evictions ending, etc. So at the core of this project, or what we proposed from that, was a pilot called the Home Preservation Project. Our goal was to address the housing spectrum needs of older adults 60 or older in suburban Cook County that can include homeowners, renters, or unhoused. At the core of this project is trained counselors at local aging service agencies that can help guide clients to build an action plan for how to address their housing needs. Anyone 60 or older can take advantage of this. Next slide. So this pilot project is only available in suburban Cook County. An easy entry point is our ADRN agencies, which again we'll touch on in just a second. And at the core of the program is older adults talking to a social service worker, making a plan of action, helping get referrals to multiple things that might help them, whether that's helping them call to subsidized housing apartments, etc. Any help they might need. It's kind of hard to describe because we do try to be broad here. It is open to everyone, but we do try to target our services to lower income individuals. At each of our agencies, there's a very limited pot of funds, for lowest income households. And there's a site where I'll share, there's a case study that was written up for US Aging. I'll share that in the chat in just a moment. Next slide. So overall, that's our pilot project for home preservation. We do encourage folks to refer particularly lower income people for help in planning out what to do. But I also wanted to mention quickly a service that is available throughout Illinois. It comes to your localities from the Illinois Department on Aging to what's called care coordination units, and it's called Emergency Senior Services, or ESS. The name implies it's for emergencies, very basic or one-time emergency needs of an individual needing assistance, and it's meant to be the payer of last resort. It's meant to be gap filling. They often do look for client contribution or other sources of funding to help with whatever the need might be. But if there is an emergency situation, again, this is one of the sources of fundings that local aging service agencies can tap into or could connect with. Very limited resources here, though. Typically, it's a $500 maximum per household per fiscal year. But again, being in touch with your ADRN agency is the way to kind of know about these different types of funding. So I'll turn over to Megan now.
Well, thank you, Jason. And thank you so much to AARP and the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus for the opportunity to participate today. Again, I'm Megan Weilman. I'm with Age Guide, and I'm just going to talk about some additional resources available in Age Guide's region to support older adults to help modify their homes for successful aging. Just a little bit about Age Guide. We are the designated area agency on aging for planning in Service Area 2. So this covers the 8 collar counties surrounding Cook County, including DuPage, Grundy, Kane, Kankakee, Kendall, Lake McHenry, and Will. Our region is actually the largest populated planning and service area in the state of Illinois, with over 734,000 adults age 60 and older residing here. And this is about 25% of the state's population of older adults. Similarly to Age Options, as an area agency on aging, we generally contract out services with local service organizations to provide most of the Older Americans Act services that we fund and administer in our region. So you can learn more about Age Guide, our advocacy efforts, and the variety of services that we offer to support older adults, caregivers, and persons with disabilities at our website, which is linked in the slide deck. So what I'm going to focus on today really are 3 programs funded through Age Guide's local partners that can provide financial assistance with home modifications and repairs to improve accessibility and safety, as well as a variety of other goods and services to help promote health, well-being, safety, and independence of folks in our region. First, we have our Flexible Community Services, or FCS funds. This is financial assistance for a variety of emergency and short-term needs, again, to promote health and well-being. And this can include food, rent and mortgage payments, home modifications and repairs, home maintenance. We've had providers use this to help folks who needed deep cleaning and decluttering services, adaptive equipment, and just a wide range of other services. Again, That's why we call them flexible community services. It's just a huge range of things that this can help cover. And the cool thing is FCS funds are not only available to persons age 60 and older, but to persons with disabilities aged 18 to 59. Next, we have our caregiver supportive gap funding, and this service is focused on family and kinship relative caregivers and is very similar to the flexible community services. Caregiver supportive gap is financial assistance designed to support a wide range, again, of short-term needs, often through supports and resources for the care of the care recipient, such as specialty meals, transportation, again, the home modifications and repairs, assistive devices, adaptive equipment, emergency rent, mortgage payments, and so much more. The service really is designed to relieve the financial burden that is often associated with those caregiving responsibilities. And the goal of the service is to improve the quality of life for both that care recipient and the informal family caregiver. So there are 3 groups of individuals that you can see on the slide that are eligible for these funds specifically. This includes our family or other informal caregivers who are 18 and older, providing unpaid care to persons 60 and older, or they could be taking care of a person of any age with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia. We then have our older relatives aged 55 and older who are not parents, who provide unpaid care for children under the age of 18. This is the group of caregivers that we often refer to as either grandparents raising grandchildren or kinship relative caregivers, which is just a really increasingly large group that we're seeing, that needs services and resources. So the older adult does not have to be a grandparent. It could be an aunt or uncle, for example. But again, the key here is it cannot be the parent of a child under the age of 18. And then our third group here are older relatives, including parents who are age 55 and older, who are providing unpaid care to adult dependent children aged 18 to 59 with severe disabilities. And then we have a third group of funding, and this is targeted towards individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. And it's just like the above 2 funding sources I talked about, but this is again to support persons with dementia of any age and their caregivers. Again, it can be used to help pay for many of those same goods and services that I've shared already, including those home modifications to help improve quality of life for the individual with dementia. We've also had providers use these ADRD gap funds for technology, such as wander prevention systems, Amazon Alexa devices, as well as security cameras. Just a few other key things to know about our age guide financial assistance services. All of these services are free of charge. There are no income or asset guidelines to qualify for these services. And that also is applied to our other Older Americans Act funded services as well. Providers are required to ask for donations to help support and expand services, but no one is ever denied service for inability or unwillingness to donate. Also, these programs are targeted to individuals living in the community. They can own the residence they live in, or they can rent. And we have many clients who rent and have received financial assistance with ramps and other home modifications to their rental unit, but they cannot be used to support individuals residing in long-term care facilities. Of course. And then in addition, funding for these services are short-term. They're not provided on an ongoing basis, and there is a limit as to how much funding from each source can be used to support an individual client in a fiscal year. And again, many of the home modification and repair requests are more expensive than what our funds can often cover. So our funded partners do really try to work really hard to combine these funding sources with other internal or external programs and resources that are available to try to cover the cost of a home improvement, repair, or modification. So that might be combining the above funding that I mentioned with those emergency senior services funds that Jason discussed, or with community partners such as working with the local Habitat for Humanity, Rebuilding Together, which was mentioned in the chat, and then RAMP. Those are just some examples of other community partners that our ADR and other partners work with. So where to get started, as Jason mentioned, we want to make sure you know who to contact to help your clients connect to the services and funding resources that Jason and I shared today. So in each of our regions, we recommend contacting the local Aging and Disability Resource Network or ADRN partner where the client lives as a starting point. Trained staff at our ADRNs really are the entry point for services that support older adults and their families. Again, they can help older adults, persons with disabilities, and their families connect to many of the services and resources available to support them in the community. And they are very knowledgeable about the funding resources and programs available to help with the home modification and repairs. And they will work with the client and family to assess their individual situation to determine what specific programs and benefits are available to assist with that requested home modification or repair need. Staff can also offer assistance exploring affordable and accessible housing options if that's identified as a need. They can also help folks apply for benefit programs to help them save money and stay in their homes, whether that's for healthcare, food prescriptions, utilities, property tax exemptions, and many more. And then, of course, not only can municipalities go to ADRNs for those programs and fundings that they have, but if you as a municipality have any programs available, we do encourage you to connect with that local ADRN to make sure that they and their staff know that you're a resource and that you might also have additional programs that can help the clients that they're serving. So I am going to hand the presentation back to Jason for a moment to provide guidance on where to direct individuals who live in Age Options region.
Thanks, Megan. So yes, as we said, in Age Options, suburban Cook County, we divide our services by townships. So listed here on this slide are the townships in suburban Cook County and the agency with phone number that you can reach out to. Or if you're an older adult or resident, go to services.ageoptions.org or call Age Options at 708-383-0258. As we know, in our area, the townships are confusing, and some towns have multiple townships. I've seen up to 3 in a town, and it's confusing. On the website or by calling us, we could take the address and find out exactly who to go to. But if you're in these townships, be connected with your local ADRN. Megan?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Jason. And I have to just say I've used that provider tool for Age Options region, and it is amazing. So encourage you to utilize that definitely as a resource for your folks who live in suburban Cook County. So this slide lists the ADRNs in Age Guides region. Again, we are those 8 collar counties, and we have an ADRN in each county. So I have their main phone number and then the website for you. And of course, if you're not sure who to contact in our region, you can always call us at Age Guide, and we can, of course, help you and your clients get connected to the local service provider serving their county. So here is our contact information. Thank you so very much again for the opportunity to participate, and let us share a bit about supportive services and funding resources available to support older adults and their families so they can live safely and independently in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan and Jason. Well, we have several minutes here for any questions. I saw Richard already asked a question in the chat. Is ADRN an Illinois term, or are these? Is that a national term?
Jason, do you want to take that one, or?
Sure. So I think it is a national term, but I found, like, when you talk to other states or other AAAs, they might have a different kind of framing for it than you do. But going to elderlocator.acl.gov is a great way to find what your local area agency on aging is. So ADRN does happen throughout the states, but it might just be a different kind of structure. So it's always good to just ask, like, if you hear how it works in Illinois or in our areas, it just is important to kind of note, may not be how it works elsewhere. And ultimately, what an agency is designated as, or even the funding Megan called out or I called out, it doesn't matter if it's ESS or home preservation or it's best to go to the ADRNs and say, I am this and this is what I need. What are some thoughts that it could help? Or I'm a caregiver or a grandparent or other relative raising grandchildren. That's maybe the way to come in at it. And because different states, different agencies might call them different things. But the ultimate goal is there's no wrong door to go into. Whether it's an ADRN or a AAA, they'll try to get you to the best source in your area. Thank you for that question.
Any other questions, feel free to come off mute or share in the chat. Well, thank you both. It was an excellent, concise, thorough presentation that we'll be sharing out the information as well afterwards. So with that, we've covered some resources that are available immediately to residents and households. Now we'll turn our attention to funding resources that are available or will be available to municipalities, since we know we have many mayors, municipal staff who are watching or will be watching this. And to start, we'll have one more poll to get a read of the room related to this topic of resources available for municipalities. So the question is, does your municipality administer a program to support residents with accessibility improvements to their homes? Yes, no, unsure, or currently exploring. So we've got a pretty even split here right now. There's about a quarter who say yes, we do, a quarter or more who say no, and several are unsure or currently exploring. So if you're currently exploring, please, I would encourage you to note that in the chat. We would love to connect with you and see if there's any way that we could help or connect you with another municipality who's further along in that process. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce our next speakers. Joining us today is Michael Wizarek, Senior Program Officer and Team Lead in the Community Affairs Department at the Illinois Housing Development Authority. In this role, Michael is responsible for managing the home repair and accessibility program, as well as the down payment assistance program run through Habitat for Humanity. Also joining us today is Nikki Picciori-Ferretti, Director of Community Affairs at the Illinois Housing Development Authority. In this role, Nikki oversees a portfolio of programs all directed towards promoting fiscally stable households and communities. Now, the Community Affairs team at IDA coordinates with external partners, including units of local government, land banks, and nonprofits. So thank you both for your frequent collaboration and support for local governments and working together to respond and serve residents' home repair and accessibility needs. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikki Picciori-Ferretti, and as Ben said, I'm the Director of Community Affairs here at IDA, and very grateful for this opportunity to join with you and my colleague Michael, who will speak in a moment about our home repair and accessibility program. But just for a quick moment of background, as many of you know, IDA was created in 1967. And since our creation, we've provided more than $20 billion in funding, creating more than 250,000 affordable homes, both rental and home ownership. And we accomplish this through a number of funding sources. At IDA, we connect people with financing. So you could say we're a bank with a public mission to finance the creation and preservation of affordable housing throughout the state. Ben gave a good overview of the community affairs team. We oversee a portfolio of programming really geared towards building and creating a strong and stable and sustainable middle class investing in households and communities. One of these programs is the Home Repair and Accessibility Program. And as Adam said earlier, AARP is supporting livable communities for all. Personally, I just love that phrase, something we certainly work on every day. And as the first polling question showed, the lack of awareness, we're hoping today we're helping address that a bit. And as I turn this over to Mike to talk about the Home Repair and Accessibility Program. Hi, Mike.
All right, Nikki, thanks for kicking us off, and Ben, thanks for your introduction as well. So yeah, we're going to discuss the Home Repair and Accessibility Program today. Here's a quick look at what we'll cover. You know, this is really good timing for this presentation because we're currently in the process of looking for grantees for round 2 of our program, and we'll be launching the application a little bit later this summer. But today, first I'll cover just some general basics about the program and how the AARP program works. Then I'll get into sharing some information about the grantee responsibilities and also what the application will look like and when that will launch. And then finally wrap up with a little bit of time for Q&A. And just a quick disclaimer, you know, information that we share today is just for general information purposes, and it's definitely subject to change. So, you know, when we release the round 2 application, anything in there will supersede what we share with you today. But nonetheless, this is definitely the broad outline of what things will look like. Here's our team's contact information real quick. As I said, I'm Mike Wyzorek, and Nikki is also on the call. Feel free to reach out to us afterwards if you have questions. All right, so let's take a look at the AARP program and how it works. So AARP is a single-family rehab program for income-qualified homeowners. And in our case, that means homeowners who are up to 80% of the area median income or below. And this program has several goals. One, we're looking to improve the health and safety and well-being of the occupants in those homes. We're looking to help income-qualified, disabled, and mobility-impaired persons remain in their homes. We're looking to help preserve existing affordable housing stock around the state, as well as provide investment in underserved communities. The program runs for 2 years, and local governments and nonprofit organizations serve as grantees. And so at IDA, we work for the grantees and provide technical assistance to them. And then the grantees are the ones who actually work with the homeowners, and the homeowners will apply through their local grantee. Also want to note that the program relies on the EPA's lead renovation, repair, and painting rule, or AARP. Just highlighting that because our prior iterations of home rehab programs, we relied on the Illinois IDPH rules, which were more stringent, and it was much more difficult for grantees to find contractors. So I don't know if that's an issue in some of your communities, but the new AARP rules, you know, make it much easier for grantees to administer while still protecting, you know, homeowners from lead. And also just a note, if you are familiar with our prior rehab programs, the single family rehab program, or SFR, and the home accessibility program, or HAP, AARP is actually a merger of those programs. We merged those about 1.5 years ago to increase the efficiency of the programs and also to address some of the issues with the programs that were preventing grantees from being able to spend funds. All right, so in terms of the kind of repairs that the AARP program can actually address, it's really anything that's health, safety, energy efficiency related, or accessibility improvements, and also repairs that ensure the long-term viability of the residents. So a good example of that could be, you know, the roof. If the roof is not is leaking or something like that, that's definitely something we want to cover under this program that will help keep the home viable long-term. And also, grantees are expected to do an inspection of the home and address any significant health and safety issues that they find. So while there's a lot of things that this program can cover, it can't be used as a weatherization program, for example. So you can't use a program and just say, all right, we're only going to do windows. No, you're going to have to go and inspect the property and then address whatever issues that you find. And related to that, you know, obviously accessibility is definitely one of the goals of the program. But at the same time, you can't use it to say, okay, we're only going to do ramps with this program. You're expected to inspect the property, and you know, if the person has accessibility needs, you can certainly address those, but also you know, other health and safety issues that you might find. And the program allows up to $45,000 in assistance per household to cover construction costs. And that assistance is provided in the form of a 3 or 5 year forgivable loan. And that means there's no monthly payments on the loan, and it's forgiven on a monthly basis over the course of the loan term. And then assuming that the homeowner stays in their home for the full term of the loan, then they'll pay nothing out of pocket. So I'll just touch on this briefly. There's 3 main project types under the HRAP program, those being full rehab, accessibility, and roof only. Full rehab and accessibility, there's up to $45,000 available. Only difference there is that if you're doing an accessibility project, needs to be a resident who's disabled or mobility impaired, and at least 30% of the costs must be utilized for accessibility improvements. And then the roof only option is really just geared towards homes that are generally fine inside, and the roof is the main concern. So those are a little bit easier for grantees to execute those projects. Client and property eligibility. So here's just a little bit more detailed look at who qualifies for the program. Again, it's up to 80% area median income. And for full rehab and roof only projects, it must be an existing residential unit, and it needs to be the owner's sole residence and privately owned. For accessibility projects, we do also currently allow a renter option as well. So either that or needs to be owned by the resident. All right, so now we'll get into the application a little bit and grantee responsibilities. So in terms of the grantees that are eligible, so units of local government and non-for-profit corporations are eligible to apply. And typically we require that the grantee or their third-party administrator have some rehab experience. And also there'll be some additional eligibility requirements that are released with the grantee application. However, these are sort of the biggest ones I would flag for you. And if you don't have rehab experience on your own, grantees can partner with a third-party administrator on an application who has that experience. So that's one possibility. In terms of the funding that will be available, our current round is $16 million. We anticipate the second round will be similar or hopefully a little bit larger. And grantee awards will likely range from about $500,000 to about $1.1 million. In terms of the responsibilities for grantees, they include everything on the slide. So they're responsible for doing the client intake and income verification, inspecting client homes, ensuring that everything is up to code, completing a scope of work write-ups, and selecting and managing general contractors, overseeing construction, and then, of course, complying with the program rules and submitting any necessary program documentation. And as I mentioned, grantees can apply with a third-party administrator. So, for example, if you have expertise in some of these areas, but not others, you could partner with another organization to sort of bring that experience to your application. For the program funding structure, up to 5% of the award amount is available to the grantee to cover administrative costs. So that's basically anything overhead related to the grant, staffing and all that kind of thing. And then grantees can also receive up to 15% of the project's construction costs to cover the staff time spent working on that project. So that includes work write-ups, doing income verification, all that kind of stuff. And then I also just want to note that the program operates mainly as a reimbursement program. However, we do pay 50% of administrative funds upfront to the grantee. And then currently we also offer 20% prepayment of project costs after the project is approved by IDA. And that particularly is helpful to a lot of nonprofit grantees who, need the assistance with cash flow, as well as for, contractors in some areas. If they're working with smaller contractors, they can't wait that long to get paid. And then the remaining balance on the project is paid after project completion. Here's a look at the anticipated timeline for the application. So as I mentioned, in this summer, we will be launching the grantee application. And applicants typically have about 6 weeks to work on their applications before they're due back to IDA. And we'll, of course, release additional information on the next round and, all the requirements and everything at that time. And then by the end of the year, winter 2024 here, funding decisions will be made public. And then winter, spring 2025, that's when our legal closing process will happen with grantees. And then the round will actually launch in spring 2025, likely in March. And then the program will run for 2 years and conclude. So if you're interested in applying or at least want to know more, I encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. And then you'll get a note. We'll send out an email when the application becomes available, so you can know right away. And of course, feel free to ask questions at that point or in the run up to it as well. And I'll post that link in the chat as well. And with that, yeah, happy to answer any questions.
I would, so this sounds terrific. This is just rolling out this year.
So this will be the second year of the program, or the second round. But yes, our round 2 is launching. The application's launching this summer, and the new round will launch in March. Our current round is ending in March next year.
And you had other iterations of renovation, remodeling, rehabbing programs in the past, right? Various kinds?
Yeah, so we had a single family rehab program, and then we had one that was geared towards accessibility. Part of the problem was the accessibility program, the limits per household were smaller. And, you know, since we're serving 80% AMI households and below, a lot of times folks needed more than just accessibility improvements. And the program design kind of made it hard for grantees to find kind of the perfect candidate houses where they only needed that and there wasn't other stuff that they needed.
Hmm.
So Richard, we had to say no to some folks because we had a lower dollar threshold on the solely accessibility program. So by merging it into the full rehab program, we increased the dollar value. So someone raised their hand and said, I need a ramp. And then someone went in to do a scope of work and said, well, you need a ramp and you need A, B, C, and D. Oftentimes that exceeded the maximum amount allowable. So now we can do rehab work along with accessibility work in the same project.
Yeah.
Terrific. That's very good.
See, we have
the idea really just being, yeah, whatever is needed, we can address. And, you know, at the end of the project, the homeowner has, you know, a healthy and safe house.
Super.
See, we have one question in the chat from Anthony asking if you would go back to the grantee responsibilities slide.
Ah, sure.
And Anthony, if you have a specific question, feel free to come off mute or share it in the chat.
And Ben, you'll share this presentation around with people too, yes? Okay.
And I think, as Michael said, we'll be hosting a webinar when we do release the RFA. Usually we like the RFA to be out on the street for a few days so folks can glance through it. But then we'll be hosting an application webinar and walking through the RFA, be able to ask questions and get some feedback at that time as well.
Well, I hope that Anthony has gotten the extra information that he needed. With that, you know, Michael and Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited for you to help get this in front of more people and thankful for all of the work you do beyond this webinar of getting word out about the program.
Likewise, yeah, glad to be here. Thanks.
So with that, I'll transition us back to Richard for the remainder of our time today. Richard will talk about some funding resources, and then we'll transition into next steps that you all can take, not just in promoting the guidebook, but what else, if you're a municipality or nonprofit, you can do to support this work.
Yeah, thanks. That was I enjoyed hearing that. It speaks to a number of things. First is the programs come and go, and I think it can be a very bewildering array of options or just plain questions on the part of just residents and consumers about what's available and what's happening. So it's important that these things get publicized widely. For a number of years, we ran a national information line on housing and accessible housing and so on. And the number one question we got from households was, I think I've heard about some funding that could help support my ramp or my bathroom or something like that. And so it led to, among other things, us publishing our first funding guide. And I think, Ben, you may have access to what is a relatively recently updated version of that, which will give you if someone who has this national contact information that they can percolate back down, but you probably would be well advised to have someone do an Illinois specific version that consumers can wade their way through and figure out a lot of these complicated eligibility kinds of things, or at least have phone numbers to call or websites. In any event, that's another resource is actually the funding guide. And another one, which is actually a national group out in University of Southern California, is called homods.org. People should take note of that. Among the many other resources it has a couple of different divisions in there that try to present the funding that's available in each state, as well as the home mod provider services that are available in each state. I don't think it's very complete, and I'm sure that the updating is always an issue. And I think what can happen is that folks in Illinois can go in there and can add and correct the information. I've done that. They didn't have us listed. And you can go in there and make sure that people can access that and then publish that widely. So I'd recommend people do that. And lastly, before I get into this conversation, I was noting in the research that all research produces more questions. And so one of the questions is that, well, if you may not have municipal programs that encourage people or allow people or support people in making home access choices, but you may have available many other kind of services, including what you just heard of from the Housing Authority and other county level resources, which you also just heard about. So it doesn't mean that there aren't resources available, it just means they may not have municipal origins. So this is just a few programs. I wasn't quite sure what people would talk about, but what many of you probably also know is that you have a voc rehab entity in Illinois. I'm pretty sure. I think we worked with them before, and you probably have a subdivision of that called independent living. So one focuses on working age people with a vocational objective. The other focuses on funding for people who don't have a vocational objective. And in many states, it's split that way. But in each case, they'll pay for some kinds of modifications to people's homes. I encourage people to research that. Again, we got that listed in our funding guide. You may have your own particular way that you characterize that. And a federal program under the Social Security Administration, two of them, that also will pay for some kinds of home access modifications, is the Impairment Related Work Expenses Program and the Plan for Achieving Self-Support. My sense is those are fairly restrictive in who they'll fund and what they'll fund. And these days, it's probably more for working age folks, but since our working ages are going so far up, it would seem to me that that might be a possibility for some people. Let me see if I can advance the slide properly. Whoops. And then HUD, I tried to track all the conversations, but obviously CDBG can be used for home access stuff, and home money can be used for either remodeling or for new construction, and that comes down to states in a variety of different ways. Oftentimes, the Housing Finance Authority will be doing that. I'm not sure those guys manage those funds in Illinois. Maybe they do for some communities. Not sure. And obviously, Medicaid for a very few folks who are eligible for home and community-based waivers can have both additional medical attention as well as home access modifications in order to keep them from being institutionalized due to health problems. So for some folks who are very badly off, that's possible. And then the last thing is something that often is overlooked, but if you've got a veteran who has some kind of a service-connected disability, VA has been in this business of modifying homes for longer than anybody else in the country. And when else you think of them, they do have funds, a couple of different funding programs that can help pay for those kinds of changes. So again, it's a very confusing array if you're sitting here as a consumer. Where do I go look? But the funding guide that we've provided and maybe other resources you all can bring to bear going forward will be useful for that. Let me just do a little check here. Okay, so we're a little behind our time. As I say, Ben has tried very hard to make this happen. So that's the funding stuff. That's about all I know in a very quick way about funding. And the next section is, if you got a hold of the universal and accessible remodeling guide, how might you promote it? How might you use it to make people aware of it and to encourage people to make those kinds of choices? Certainly the promotion could include all the online stuff from municipal websites to other websites, social media, of course, Facebook, I still think is a great way to do that. You could do on-demand videos. We have a number of videos. You might make your own videos that might reveal information about this. It could be the video of this for all I know, or various kinds of newsletters. So all those kinds of resources, I think you'll have to think about promoting this under. Having copies in the libraries, of course, is obvious. Having copies to give away at the councils on aging and senior centers makes sense. I know you have independent living centers in Illinois, and those would be other places to locate these copies and have them publish it on their websites. And you might also take an active role in kind of creating public forums around this topic. Get people talking together, bring people together to discuss this and to talk about, use the guide perhaps as the leverage to do that. And finally, there's a notion that you could have home remodeling competitions. You could sponsor competitions with small cash prizes. You'd be surprised how much that serves to kind of elevate people's awareness, and whether or not they choose to compete, then you may spur ideas for folks going forward. So those are some notions about how you might promote it. And we're going to move ahead here so we can see if we can bring this home. And here's a poll. Ben, we're going to do this one now. Yeah? Nodding your head. Does your municipality currently have strategies in place to incentivize residents to make accessibility improvements? And there we go.
The results are in. We have 10 no's and 3 unsures, and there are more coming, but that is the group. So Richard, I think we go back one slide actually.
Want me to go back a slide? Whoops. There we go. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. So yeah, so for incentives, there aren't as many levers as you can pull, perhaps as effectively as with new construction. But it is possible, if you set up incentive programs, that you could rebate, not waive, but rebate people permitting fees if they do certain kinds of accessibility or age-friendly improvements in their homes. You'd have to establish some mechanism for reviewing that and for signing off on certificates of occupancy and so on. It's also possible to give some allowances for ordinarily what would be setbacks to allow things like ramps or other accessibility provisions to encroach into what otherwise would be your typical setback limitations for construction. Somewhat more controversial is the possibility of short or medium-term property tax adjustments, whether you could incentivize people by giving them a certain percentage off their tax bill over a certain number of years if they did this. It is kind of a companion to the rebating or permitting fees. And then lastly, it might be possible to incent people by assuring some kind of a fast track for those kinds of projects. So they would be able to go to the head of the line in terms of getting those early permitting kinds of actions taken. So those are just a few. Sorry, I misdid that. So let me go back here. So one idea around how to tackle this problem, short of just throwing what's obviously needed, which is way more money at this. But if you've got, particularly in suburban and urban areas with lots of different programs, I've just heard about some of them here, as my eyes were spinning with all of the different programs and the jurisdictional overlaps. But since so many of the programs are siloed, having some kind of coordinated entry system might be viable. And I think I heard folks mention that from the AAAs, and which means necessarily getting different of these repair and home mod programs talking to each other and coordinating their activities, which might improve resource allocation, because it might be the kind of thing where you can decide between and amongst you in these programs, in these areas where you have multiple operators, to shift one project from operator A to operator B, or, but depending upon geography or current funding or current capacity or so on. So it might be more efficient, might stretch dollars farther if you can know what other people are doing and be able to share that information. And it might be less strain on customers if you can, as I say, I think I heard earlier, not force them to run around to 4 or 5, 6 or 7 different entities to figure out which ones they might be eligible for, and getting on all these different waiting lists. So it would take a certain amount of effort and support to make that happen. It might be great to do a pilot program in some place and then see if it's replicable. That would be my advice. Okay, so poll 5. How is your municipality incentivizing residents to make accessibility improvements? So other question was, are you doing it? And then how are you doing it? My guess is the answer will be a disappointing one from an action step, but
For time's sake, we can skip this one.
what's that, Ben?
For time's sake, we can skip this one.
Okay. We're guessing what the answer is. So finally, I think what I've been almost finally tasked to do is to talk about new construction and how that might be laid out, because you've got some opportunities there as well. And I know visitability is something that's been done in Illinois. It has its origins in the 20th century. I think we need to kind of update our approach to this and go beyond visitability to actual authentic livability of homes. And so I think that you need to kind of think about extending what might be some well-intended programs that are fairly limited, and broadening them to increase the number of homes that are built that are actually age-friendly in their entirety and universally designed at the same time. So we've got some of that material that we're developing on our end. We'd be happy to share it with folks or talk to folks going forward about what kinds of initiatives and how that kind of might be managed on the municipal level to roll out a program that might have some requirements or maybe incentives for new construction. So that's the short take on that. I guess the idea is you can contact Ben if you're interested in pursuing that further. We'd be happy to help and work with you. And now we're going into the home stretch, Ben.
Yes, so I see one person has messaged me. If there are others that are interested in this topic and exploring and learning more about construction guidelines for new home construction, basically the other side of this coin to complement remodels, please contact me. But that, I do want to ask one question, Richard, that we got earlier from Judy, and it may be a very difficult question for you to answer, but it's why do newly built homes put so much emphasis on stairs leading into them rather than making them more accessible to begin with?
Well, I can answer it. It's a longer answer. We have time for sure. If you're talking about market rate construction, it's because the builders don't hear enough consumers demanding something different and voting with their dollars. Not enough builders are seen as losing business to other guys or gals who are building more universally designed housing. So part of it is consumer demand, and that's kind of what we talk about a little bit throughout this conversation today, about how do you make the public more aware of the need for this stuff, and from a universal design perspective, how the housing can look the same as other homes, but just have these high function features. And there's not enough, promotion around it. I mean, we've been building homes the same way for years, and we're finally kind of figuring out we need to do it differently. So it'll take a while for that wheel to turn. But that's my short answer, is that consumers aren't demanding it. And there's a lot of other conversations about how you can incent on a national level, on a federal level, on a state level, more of that stuff to happen. But sadly, that's true.
Thank you, Richard. We're coming to the home stretch. If you want to share some highlights of what your institutes are doing now.
Yeah, just briefly, there's a couple of, or 3 different programs we're working on now that you'll hear about later this year. One is a handbook relative to this universal design in residential, a handbook on how a locale can initiate and be successful at implementing a universal design strategy for housing in their communities. Another is a handbook on how you can use competitions, design competitions, residential design competitions to, again, raise awareness, educate, and promote universal and age-friendly design in your areas. And then finally, is our working now moving into the multifamily area, trying to encourage those who build affordable multifamily to update their standards to the 21st century demographic. And I don't know where the folks at the Housing Authority in Illinois fit in this, but a lot of places they're still backwards looking to the kind of demographics of the 20th century and percentages of accessible units and type A units and the rest of it, far lower percentages than are needed now and going forward. So we're working in that area, trying to have developed a bunch of standards that we can share with folks. Others are doing it elsewhere in the country, but that's what we're doing now. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Richard. I want to give a moment for Adam to share any updates that you would like about AARP and how people can get involved in your work related to this.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Hi again, everybody. So yeah, AARP has a couple of resources I want to mention really quick. Through our national, we have what's called our home fit guide. Some of the material is going to be very similar to what you just saw presented as far as the nuts and bolts of taking a house room by room, but it is a little more consumer focused, right? I think the guide we put together here is very thorough and complete, and that's amazing. We needed a resource with that level of detail, but the home fit guide is a little more pitched to more, again, consumer facing rather than more as technical, but it does offer some really practical tips of steps folks can take along the way, right? Before they start looking at a major remodel or a major construction project, there are other things that can happen first, easier things, lower cost things that can be done along the way as folks age. So the home fit guide really lays that out well. You can find that online at aarp.org/homefit. So I'd recommend that resource as kind of a companion piece to the guide that we put together and are presenting today. And then I also wanted for the municipalities and nonprofits on the call, a reminder, or if you're hearing about this for the first time, we have our Community Challenge Grant Program at AARP that we run every year. And these are small grants. They can range anywhere from like 5,000 up to 20,000 or so, sometimes a little more than that, depending on the project. But these are projects that can impact and improve livability in your communities through a one-time infusion of cash like that. So it could be a park project. It could be a project like this where you're developing some kind of resource for your community to improve livability. The Community Challenge grants are available every year. The current grant cycle is closed, so that there's nothing to apply for right now. But I will say that the grant cycle opens every year, right at the beginning of the year. It's usually mid to late January when the program opens. If you remember the Mayors Caucus, we will get that information out to you in January or early February, whenever the next cycle opens. But be on the lookout for that early next year. And then again, that happens every year. So that's a Community Challenge program through AARP. And any questions about that, feel free to reach out to Ben or I, and we can tell you more. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. Two more quick promotions from the Mayor's Caucus, starting with Crispina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ben. Just a quick plug for our Age-Friendly Communities Collaborative, which supports communities in their efforts to ensure communities are livable for all ages. This task force is chaired by Mayor Ducey and Trustee Vasquez from the Village of River Forest. I'm going to put our link in the chat for additional information about the task force. We meet quarterly. We have 2 upcoming meetings, one on June 20th, where we will have a presentation from the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. They will be coming to speak on assisted transportation. And we also have had a program, our Aging in a Changing Region, that provided customized support to 16 municipalities over the span of 3 years. And this included helping them to place an aging lens on top of local operations, and also included engagement of residents and stakeholders. So at our September 5th meeting, we will be presenting best practices in sharing information resources with community stakeholders and residents that were learned by our cohort through the Aging and Changing Region program. And again, those meetings are on Thursdays, and they will be at 10 a.m. on those respective dates. And as I mentioned, the link is in the chat, and you'll also see the meeting dates there. Thank you, Ben.
Yep. Thank you, Crispina. So that brings us to a close here. I will be sending not only this recording to all attendees, but also a link so you can all access the guidebook that Richard created and presented, and also the funding guide that Richard created and includes the Illinois specific funding that we heard here today. So I would encourage you all, if you're a municipality or a nonprofit, you're welcome to post the design guidebook, the funding guide, and even the training webinar on your website, and share those 3 out with any residents who would need them, so they could learn through all 3 resources. So thank you all for attending and for the work that you do for our communities.
Thanks, Ben.